you support an opt-in or opt-out policy for kids checking out books from school libraries, and why?
I would generally favor, well, let me back up. That's an interesting way to ask the question. What you're talking about are books that some parents believe have inappropriate content,
Correct.
Sexual content.
And the district currently has an opt-out policy.
Right,
So
and I've seen some of those books because my daughter-in-law is very interested in this because she has children in junior high and in elementary. And frankly, I don't think those books have really any part to play in our school system. I can't imagine what it is. But having said that, if a teacher for some reason wants to utilize a book that has inappropriate content, in my view, I would be in favor of opting into that and not having to opt out of it. The opt-out policy, to me, puts pressure on young people and parents. They're not going to want to do that, some of them, because they don't want to be seen as weird or different, or that there's something wrong with them. So I would be more in favor of an opt-in, but beyond that, globally, I just think there are books that are inappropriate at certain ages. Now, as you get older, as you get into junior high and high school, then things become a little different. And I think there are courses that you can take in high school, electives, that the subject matter may be appropriate to that course, a current events course, or a course or something like that. But when we're talking about students in early grades, I just think there's some things that are just appropriate. They don't need that at that age.
And let me follow up and clarify, because part of what we're talking about, and a large bit of the controversy has been about school libraries. So should the books even be in the school libraries, and then should the parents be able to should it be incumbent upon the parents to give the librarians a list of, I don't want my student to check out these titles, or should it be the other way around?
Again, I'm just going to answer this globally. I think there are some books that don't belong in school libraries, especially elementary libraries, junior high libraries. I don't know why some of these books are in those libraries. There's a public library, which has everything you can imagine. We have an amazing library in this community, and there are libraries online. If parents want their children to have access to those kinds of materials, they can get it whenever they want to. But again, I just think in our schools, materials ought to be appropriate to the age group. I'm so against trying to sexualize young children. I have seen in my life, in not just the work I do, but in the work I've done in my church for the past 18 years, I have seen so many lives destroyed because of pornography, addiction to pornography. It's one of the most horrible addictions there is. To me, it's worse than alcohol or drugs. I've seen families destroyed. I've seen individuals destroyed. I've seen suicides. So I'm just generally opposed to sexualizing young children. At some point, they're going to get it, okay? But I want it to be, I would like it to be at an appropriate age.
Do you support an opt-in or opt-out policy for kids checking out books, and why?
Absolutely an opt-out policy. I think the discussion that was had at the last work session for the board was super important. We had a majority of the trustees who agreed with the policy once they learned what the policy was. And I think that's a super important point, is that it's hard to decide about how to feel about a policy until you know what it is. And so once they learned all of the work that the librarians do, how they choose books, that all of these books that are on this watch list by the Moms of Liberty, all those books that have been chosen by the librarians have recommendations through national different organizations saying that those are books that we should be reading, our kids should be reading. They won awards, they have themes in them that are super important for teenagers, those types of things. So for one small group of parents to say, oh, we don't think anybody should be able to read this is not appropriate. That's saying that those parents aren't paying attention. That's a little bit condescending. And so I think making sure that we trust our librarians, all the work they're doing, and trust the process that the school board has used for many years is important. And obviously, once the majority of the school board trustees learned what that process was, they felt comfortable with it.
All right, next question is, do you support an opt-in or an opt-out policy for kids checking out books from school libraries, and why do you have that opinion?
Mm-hmm. So I've had the experience as a teacher of the opt-out policy, where, we were teaching a 10th grade English book, and a student was not comfortable with that subject of the book, and it was handled with myself, the student, and the parent, which I think a lot of our issues or a lot of concerns are often solved that way, at the very minimal, lowest level. And the opt-out policy allows for that to continue to happen. And I don't even necessarily know that you need to go to the opt-out policy if you feel that comfortable and have that conversation with the instructor or the teacher, because most likely the teacher is going to say, oh, I completely understand. And in my case, that's what happened. I understand, I appreciate your perspective, and we will find another book for your child to read, and we can do the same activities based on what they're reading. And so I think that the opt-out policy is working well, and it's doing exactly what it's designed to do.
Your example was with you as a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
If the students are just going to the library, if they have an open library period, how should parents handle what their kids are able to check out at the library? Right.
So the first thing that I think, another misconception that has unfortunately made the headlines, is that certain books are available to elementary students. And I can tell you, as having taught at the elementary level and the junior high and the high school level, those books that some parents are concerned about are not available in the elementary library. So I just think it's important to make that distinction, that many of the books that parents have made concerns about are not available to K-6 students or 7th and 8th grade students. The more controversial books tend to be at the high school level. I think school librarians do a fantastic job, and I think if they know what a parent's concerns are, they will make sure those things are followed. And so to say that anything is available to any student at any time is just not accurate.
Do you support an opt-in or an opt-out policy for kids checking out books from school libraries, and why do you have that position?
So there's already a great program in the LCSD1 library system, but also in the school system, is that you can opt out of anything that you find objectionable. And what's great about that is it actually puts the rights of parents at the forefront. Every parent can opt out of anything they don't feel their kids should read. And that's great, because if you had an opt-in, you literally step on parental rights and say, I'm sorry, you don't get any choices unless you go through everything and decide what you can read. That's not what education's about. Education is about access to all knowledge that's there in front of you. Scary knowledge, fun knowledge, historical knowledge, it's all there for you. And so opting out means you make the distinct choice to say, I don't want my kids to learn that. And that's okay, that's what the parents' rights are. it's not the school board's job to tell you what you can and cannot read. It's our job to give you all the access to all the books. And so therefore the parents need to make that choice. Yes, will it take a lot of effort on the parents' part? Yeah, but that's what parenting is. We get involved with our kids, we find out how their education is going, and we care. And that's why the opt-out program is perfect, because it gives the parents their rights and all the responsibility.
Do you support an opt-in or opt-out policy for kids checking out books from school libraries, and why?
I support the board opt-out. Opt-out, again, I was an involved mom through elementary, all through school, still am. I mean, my 16-year-old's not super happy that, I'm still involved. He thinks he can do it all. Now that he can drive and he's the only one at home, right? But it's important to me. It's important to me that I raise my children the way that I want them to be raised. It's important to me that I present them the information that I want them to be presented with. Is that the same that you want? No. Is that the same that you want? I don't know. And who is the district to determine what they're going to present to all the public? And so I do support the opt-out, and I'm even happy. So what I was going to say is that that's the situation I used when my kids were in elementary school myself. I'm the one self-motivated that went to the school librarian and made friends with her. I made friends with my kids' teachers. I made friends with the kids' teachers and, the principals and all that, just so that I was aware of what was going on in the school. And I do understand that not everyone has that luxury. And so that's why this is in place, is because not everyone has had the luxury that I had to be so involved in my kids' education and with their teachers. But also the district took it a step further by giving you the opt-in, right? The buzzword opt-in. You can opt in through the free Destiny program that they've offered through the school, and at that web-based site that allows you to curate reading lists for your children by topic and by book. So if you don't have the time to go into the schools and foster a relationship with those librarians or your kids as teachers, this is where you can take, your lunch hour or whatever and fill out this list. It helps the librarians and teachers know what your goals are for your children, and it's easy to do, and it's free, and the district has provided that for us and for everyone who takes advantage of it. I do feel that the opt-out sheet is a little bit buried inside of the board policies. It does need to be brought to the forefront and easier access. My one suggestion for that would be we fill out all kinds of information on web-based, on Infinite Campus when we register our kids. I'm answering questions as to if I'll allow Tylenol and if they can have their picture taken and all that gamut of stuff. Why do we not offer the opt-out policy right then and there as well? Why are we not offering that, as you can't go any further unless you choose opt-in or opt-out? Whether you go to the web-based thing is up to the parent then after that, but at least it's in front of their face and they get to make that choice right then and there.
Do you support an opt-in or opt-out policy for kids checking out books in their school libraries?
So we have three methods now that we can do this. We have the opt-out, where you can list particular books and genres. You have an opt-in, where you can create your own list. Yep. And then you can totally opt them out of the library, which personally I would never recommend. There's so many great books in there, and I'm sure you can find something for your child if you look. So I say do what you think is best for your child. Do whichever makes sense to you. My concern, and I have a few, is that you have parents out there that aren't paying attention to what's going on. I think that the school district, they have it on their main page. They have all the different methods, I believe now. They have a little bullet thing. Then you have in the parent-student handbook, when it talks about the libraries, you've got all that listed once again. But again, what about the parents that aren't looking at that? So that's my concern with that, with any of those and what we have in our libraries. And I'd asked the question before, was when you get certain genres in there, like young adult, and in my mind, young adult is 18 to 30 or 18 to 35, I'd look that up, then I have difficulty with that and start asking, how does this help our test scores, or does it? And why do we need them in there? And I think that we had a couple of ladies that spoke about why they felt the books were good for them, so okay. But I just have those types of issues.
If you're elected to the school board, would you entertain requests to remove certain books from the library? Do you think that's appropriate, or do you think it's more a matter of educating people so that they can opt their children out of reading those particular books? Do you believe in removing certain books? Are there books that are problematic in our school libraries?
I'm not a book banner, I will say that. I'm all about reading, but I do have concerns about some of them that are in there. So yes, I would entertain that. About either doing I don't even know what to call it, where parents have to sign off if it's listed as a young adult book.
So that would be an opt-in.
Something like a firm opt-in.
Another academic issue, do you support the current opt-in policy for checking out books, the opt-out policy for checking out books at school libraries, or do you support an opt-in policy for parents in schools?
I'm sorry.
To check out a book, or should they, with their parents' permission, or how should that work?
Okay, once again, I've looked at the opt-out policy for the district, and I think there's nothing wrong with it. It gives parents latitude like crazy about what they can do in terms of books. Plus, there's a challenge process beyond the opt-out policy. So if a parent wants to challenge a book, they can do that. And then it goes to a committee on that challenge. So there's a process, again, Brian, that can be followed that can protect the rights of the student and the parent, and even the librarian. So it protects everybody. So to me, an opt-in to opt-out sounds kind of, I don't even know how to call it in a psychology phrase, actually. It's just reverse psychology, maybe, I don't know. But my children, again, they're adult children now, but they're great learners. But that came from reading, and reading whatever. You know, oh, you get nervous because, oh, I looked at some boobs or whatever, oh my God, or they said something. Well, yeah, oh, but what about it? Did you learn anything? Did you just, were you nervous? Were you embarrassed? Well, maybe that's what had to happen. You had to get embarrassed because of that passage in that book. But did that throw you off from learning? No, it didn't. It didn't throw you off from learning. They want to ban books like Catcher in the Rye, Brian, okay? Historical classical books. Animal Farm. Gosh, I can go on and on. I made a list, but I can go on. But other books they're looking at banning has to deal with the LGBT community, has to deal with the community of color. Okay, again, hatred coming in the frame of we want to protect our children. That's not how you protect them. You leave them open. You leave them open to look at this big world of ours.
Do you support an opt-in or an opt-out policy for kids checking out books from school libraries, and why?
To be honest with you, this has been one of the hardest topics for me to wrap my head around deciding to run for school board. I didn't realize how hot the topic was. And so I've really tried to see from both sides And I think what's going on is there's just a huge miscommunication on both sides. And so I'm personally really confused. I think, so my opinion is that, I mean, we have dress codes in place to encourage modesty. We have rules where, hey, no cussing in the hallway, no discriminating. Like there are rules to ensure that our school is a safe environment. And so my personal opinion, again, I haven't read any of these books. I don't even know what books people are talking about, to be honest with you. I think it's hard for me because I know it's such a big issue. But it's like, okay, but our kids can't read. Like, can we focus on how to teach our kids to read? So anyways, opt in or opt out. I think personally, what I have seen, what I have heard, again, I haven't personally read these books, but if there are books in our libraries that have extreme sexually explicit content or graphics, I think those books should be in an opt-in policy. That way we're not banning books or censoring the library. I think our librarians do a fantastic job at making sure that the kids are checking out age-appropriate material. That's not to say it's not in our libraries, but I think first and foremost, all material needs to be kept age-appropriate, period. Secondly, again, with the opt-in, those whatever books those are, and I don't know how it would even go about getting I don't even know what it would look like to search out those books, so I'm not speaking on any kind of experience, but just personally, I feel those books should just have the opt-in and not a whole, any sexual book or any innuendo. Like, no, people age appropriately. Kids learn and kids heal from reading things that they can relate to. But that doesn't mean it has to be extreme where you aren't even allowed to read it out loud. So I think not banning those books, not getting rid of those books or whatever people are saying, but having those books be an opt-in, that way we're not getting them off limits from students. It's not getting anything out of our libraries, but just having the parent be informed that those are being checked out versus having a parent be like, oh, I need to know this book and this book and this book and this book. Like, if your student has interest in reading that, they can ask for the opt-in for that book specifically. So again, not a whole genre of anything sexual or anything that teaches about discrimination or touches on that or whatever. I don't think all of that should be opt-in. I think our opt-out policy is appropriate for those. And the opt-out gives the parents the right to choose. Again, the parents have the ultimate right. But those, I don't even know what books we're talking about, but those books that are like, oh, like you blush hearing it because it's like, oh my gosh, why is this in our library? Those books should just have the opt-in policy, in my opinion.
Do you support an opt-in or opt-out policy for kids checking out books from the school libraries? Why?
I like to just say I support the policy that exists. I think it's all-encompassing. In fact, at the executive session, I learned a ton, which was super helpful. Everything from you can opt out an author. You can opt out a whole genre, although I wouldn't suggest that, but you can if you want to. You can curate a list of books that support your values. You can even see the books that your children are checking out. I think this is one of the topics where education and wanting to understand what the policy is. It really shows that parents have all the rights. They do. There's nothing there that I saw where you can't do that as a parent. I think what they're asking is, call the librarian. That's all you. This is one of those where I think the district went 90% and the parent has to go 10. They have the technology, they have the policy, and you just need to call your librarian and they're going to work with you. And they're gonna probably pull books in your value scheme that maybe you never thought of. So you get some perspective and a little bit more well-rounded in this. So I support the policy.
Do you support an opt-in or opt-out policy for kids checking out books from school libraries, and why?
So the Destiny program is available in our libraries. And it provides, in my opinion, all the flexibility. Well, let me back up a little bit. So the initial question is, who needs to be the decision maker in this process? Am I going to make decisions about what books Paulette's children read, or Lindsay's children, or anybody else's children? No, I'm not going to do that. It's none of my business. They're not going to make decisions about what my child reads either. It's not part of the deal. So the decision maker is with the parent. The parent is the decision maker. We have an opt-out policy currently. I think it works fine. There are people that criticize it, and they say, well, we need an opt-in policy. Well, actually, we have an opt-in policy. So we have a policy where a parent can work with the school librarian and curate a list of books. And they can go in and say, this is the list, these are the only books my child can check out. This list of 25, 30 books. They can't check out any other books. So to me, that's an opt-in policy. So the librarian will say, you bet, we can do that. So the parent is really in total control. They don't have to be aware of everything that's on the shelf. And we can't control what Jimmy shows Johnny in the library or what Johnny accesses on their cell phone. But the Destiny program and our incredibly talented librarians are happy to work with parents. Parent can go in and say, you know, I don't want my child to see anything that has, sexually explicit language or anything like that. Librarian will say, okay, you put together a list of the books you want your child to read, and I'll make sure that child does not check out any other book. Or you can say, my child doesn't have any business being in a library, I don't want him to go in there. No books. They can do that too. So I think the process works really well. There are those that disagree, but.
Do you support an opt-in or opt-out policy for kids checking out books from the school libraries, and why?
Yes, thank you for asking me that question, because boy, there has been a lot of misinformation out there on this one. I'm going to give just a brief history. A couple of years ago, there was a book that was challenged in one of our elementary schools by a family, and it dealt with an issue they didn't want their student reading. And at the time, we didn't really have a system of opting in or opting out. So I actually went to the English language coordinator and I said, what can we do for parents that are interested in opting out of books like this, or any book? And we developed, she and I had a conversation, she developed a form, I brought it to the board and we adopted it. And it gave parents choices to opt out of genres. It gave parents choices to opt out of titles and also authors. Then this last year, earlier this year, we had some parents come to our board meeting and they read out loud some passages that were so sexually explicit and graphic that they had to be stricken from the video because they were not deemed appropriate for K-12 audiences. So my first initial thought was, why are we offering that kind of content in our schools when we have dress codes and we have language, barriers where you can't use obscenity, and we have all kinds of filters on our school computers to prevent accessing sexually explicit content. So I asked that question, and turns out, after meeting with our library professionals, that we get these books in, and they do use professional resources to review them, but you can't necessarily search them by a scene that is graphically described in the book. So you might want to opt out of a genre like horror or drama or whatever, but you might not be able, that might not catch a book that has a passage in it, 5, 15 pages, whatever, of a scene depicted through words of sex acts that are pretty explicit and I would consider adult content. So therein lied the problem. So I asked about an opt-in policy for those particular books. It has nothing to do with genres, it has nothing to do with themes or topics, personal preferences or lifestyles. It has to do with, are we as a district going to be consistent in our policy? Are we going to be accountable to parents that we're going to put some kind of parental consent on accessing adult content that's sexually graphic for minors? Or are we just going to, hope the parent knows about it and then also happens to know the title and the author of the book? Because at this point, they can go in and meet with the librarian and say, and our professional librarians are wonderful. They're going to want to work with us as parents. Our administrators are going to want to accommodate the requests of parents. But we don't have a system in place, and this is, again, my mind thinking policy. We don't have a system in place that's going to capture necessarily a book that has a scene that's graphically and explicitly describing sex acts, unless that librarian happens to know about that book. And right now we don't have a policy to have those librarians identify those books. That's what I wanted to do. I've been told by different parents that are concerned about this issue that we're talking about a few dozen, I'm not quite sure how many books, but we have over 350,000 books in our library system. So this is not a big job. This would be to look into our young adult books and try to identify using outside resources, professional resources we already consult with, but maybe resources that might be looking for these kinds of passages, to identify them and put them in an opt-in where a parent then could say, hey, school, I'm okay with my son or my daughter reading this book with this scene in it. But I just felt it was the more responsible way. It gave parents another choice. It put the onus on the district, saying we're providing this adult bookstore type of content in this one scene in this book, and if you're okay with it, then we're okay with it. But I really feel like it's irresponsible for us not to address the issue. We are serving minors, and this is graphic and explicit sexual content, and I just don't think that we should be offering that without parental consent.
Thank you.
So just to clarify on that, it sounds like you're for somewhat of a hybrid, an opt-out and an opt-in?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and that's, that's been, the dialogue has been, well, a lot of people have been reacting to what I think they think is a national issue and what might be going on in other places. And maybe people are aware of those books and have asked if they're here and they realize they are here. Maybe that's where it came from. I don't know the source, but I'm just thinking practically about the policy.
Do you support an opt-in or opt-out policy for kids checking out books from school libraries, and why?
Yeah, I absolutely support the current policy that we have. The opt-out policy we have empowers parents to work with librarians to curate the materials that they want their kids to have. It really plays on parents' rights. It allows parents to decide what's best for their kids and their families. And our librarians in this town are fantastic. They want to work with parents. They want to have those conversations. And they know those libraries and they know those books. So they can really help parents in that opt-out system to do what's best for them. The opt-in system becomes a nightmare, a paperwork nightmare. In one district in Florida, they have an opt-in system. Only, I think it was around 24% of the kids had opted into the libraries, which means somewhere around 75% of the kids in that particular district weren't able to use the libraries. And it was because they had to have a permission slip signed and bring the permission slip back. You're a former teacher, you know how proficiency go, right? You send them home and they vanish, no matter how hard we try. So that creates all sorts of logistical problems. But the opt-out system really gives parents that right to work with those librarians to curate what they need. And I truly support the policy. I think it's a good policy. The policy for procuring books is a good policy because, again, we have really great librarians in this district who know their jobs, who know what they're doing, who are professionals at what they do. And we need to continue to use them.
Do you support an opt-in or opt-out policy for kids checking out books from school libraries?
I support the way the policy has been, opt-out. It's my responsibility as a parent myself to engage with my kids about their education and the things that they see and read, and also have a level of expectation between us and the things that we support and believe in our morals. I know that unfortunately that's not the way that it is for everyone, but parents and students have to take more responsibility a little bit in their education of their kids, and that includes knowing what your kid is checking out or what they aren't checking out in the library. I feel like district librarians would love it if parents called them like they do a classroom teacher or a principal and had a conversation with them about the books that they want their kids to be checking out or they don't want to be checking out.
Melissa, do you support an opt-in or opt-out policy for kids checking out books from school libraries, and why?
I do not support the opt-in policy. Liberty is the rule. Restrictions are the exception. I have strong faith and a strong moral compass, and I find it offensive for other people to imply otherwise by saying that I have to opt in for my child to read a book that others deem to be explicit or offensive. Real liberty is the right for me to say what book my kid can read, and for no one to say what book they can't. And if they want to restrict what their kid reads or define something as offensive, that's fine. Every parent has that right. You can go to the library and see what your kid's books are. I did. I went and talked to the librarian. She told me exactly what my child likes to read, where she hangs out, and she was more than happy to tell me how the books were purchased. But again, real liberty is at stake here. And book banning is on the table. And once we start with this process, it just keeps going. They initially had no opt-in policy or opt-out policy, but because of complaints, we created an opt-out policy, fine. But now we want an opt-in policy. But even that wasn't going to satisfy everyone. Even at the work session, there were clear signals that this is not the end. So I do not support the opt-in policy because it is a restriction on my freedom to parent my child, and it's a judgment on my beliefs.